Thank you, Dr. Patel, and thank you, Dr. Herbst. Can everybody hear me?
We can.
All right, wonderful. I'm ducking out of a clinic workroom and going to do this. We'll spend a couple of minutes talking about the use of FoundationOne CDx, which we've been eagerly anticipating, and then I'll be happy to take a couple of questions and then have to run back to see a few patients. So the FoundationOne platform has been integral, as we know, to the LUNGMAP study from the beginning. And we use FoundationOne. If we can go back a slide, I don't think I'm advancing these. Thank you. So the Foundation Medicine platform that has been the DNA next generation sequencing platform from the beginning of LUNGMAP. And really that company has taken their platform from one of many DNA next-gen sequencing platforms to now FDA-approved companion diagnostics, which is widely used across the country as one of the standards of care. We've been aware since that CDx approval that there are patients that may have known CDx testing and prior testing, but we haven't been able to use that information to make them eligible for LUNGMAP because of a variety of logistical issues. So over the last year, the LUNGMAP chairs have been very interested in allowing CDx testing that's known without an additional tissue submission requirement. And I'll talk to you for a couple of minutes today about the mechanisms to do that. So this, of course, requires known testing as well as tissue availability. But for those patients, and we can go to the next slide now, for those patients who have had CDx testing all the way back dating to and including September 1st, 2019, now we can use that in lieu of tissue. So we anticipate the protocol that's currently in amendment, version March 1st, 2021, that should be released shortly, will allow either the submission of tissue for biomarker profiling, as is the current state, or a note and a consent that patients have had prior commercial FoundationOne CDx testing results after September 1st, 2019. For those sites submitting the commercial results, they have to have the report available. And the sites will provide the test order. They'll provide results done on solid tumor tissue. So this does not include the Foundation liquid platform as of this point. And patients also have to consent specifically to have the commercial results released to SWOG. As one of the side effects of this, we've realized over the conduct of the study that PD-L1 testing, which was included historically in the testing together with Foundation Medicine testing for tissue on the LUNGMAP sub-studies, PD-L1 testing has been less important on the current sub-studies. So because we're not requiring tissue submission from everybody, we're not going to perform universal PD-L1 testing on that tissue any longer. But we do acknowledge that most sites probably have known PD-L1 testing results from tissue already when enrolling patients. So we'll just request that through the EDC. These commercial test results, you can't just say, here's the result, can we get sub-study assignment? We're actually going to do a repeat analysis of those commercial test results. So Foundation Medicine is going to take the raw data, re-put it into the analysis pipeline, and there is a chance that results can be different from what's on the commercial CDx report. So if we note that, or if the sites note that, that's because of the repeat analysis. So say somebody in 2019 had a gene that was noted that was a variant of uncertain significance or VUS. It could be possible that now in 2021 that VUS is of significance and is noted differently. But this reanalysis will go into the same exact mechanisms to assign to sub-studies as new tissue testing will. So that is the reason that we will predict, at least in the beginning, up to a 16-day turnaround. This won't be instantaneous, even though the data is already there. Next slide. So mechanistically, what do sites have to do? And we'll go through this in a bit more detail now. For patients submitting commercial FoundationOne CDx results, it'll go through the same STS system. They'll have a packing list. These details will be in the protocol, and it'll go through a metadata rave. And back one slide, thank you. So, and submitting all the details about the information to submit are down below in the bullet points and will be available in the protocol as well. Next slide. So in conclusion, the next protocol amendment, we hope, will allow prior tumor Foundation CDx testing, and we're very excited about this. We don't think that September 2019 will be very limiting because most of these patients within the last year and a half or 2 years that have test results, they will be allowed to use this mechanism. And I just wanted to let you know that the study chairs are also looking into incorporating other DNA next-gen sequencing platforms as well. It was a complicated enough process just to use an alternative pipeline for the Foundation Medicine platform, but we hope to use the NCI match as a model in which other CLIA certified labs can be approved for sub-study assignment, maybe over the next year or more. So we're working on that as well so that patients don't need repeat testing and can get fast and immediate access to these exciting sub-studies within LUNGMAP. Questions? Thank you.
Hey, Joe. Joe?
Yes. Yeah.
When do you think we will be able to use some of the other tests? How long?
Yeah, I think it would be hard to anticipate less than a year from now, but we're starting those discussions. We're forming a subcommittee in order to look at the mechanics of this. And I guess the question is, will we be able to at least incorporate 1 or 2 other testing platforms at the beginning, and then have a mechanism by which other labs can apply for approval? I'm hoping, I think realistically it's going to be a year or more though, Roy, but I hope that we can have that to go as fast as possible. Okay? I know that there's an unmet need out there.
And Roy, just to remind you, we're going to try to go through the presentations and have a panel question and answer at the end.
Okay.
All right, that's great.
right.
We'll have to drop off to run to patients, but appreciate all of your attention today and support of this study.
Thanks, Joe. Well, now we have Jessica O'Donovan from our Site Coordinators Committee, Consent Form Changes and Implementation. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, everyone. So I'm just going to go through briefly over some of the consent form changes now that we are going to have the changes that were just talked about. Next slide. So first, for best practices of implementation and training, you're going to notice with this update that there are some very different things in the consent form that I'm going to go over after this slide. And it's going to take some very clear definition and probably a couple of presentations at meetings, and everybody who's consenting is going to have to be very clear on what they're saying to patients, because all of the information for every group for pre-screening versus screening is going to be on the same consent form, as well as previous testing and patients who need to send in tissue for testing. So pretty much, you're going to have to review the protocol very carefully. I would suggest bringing it to team meetings to go over a couple of times, and then prior to consenting, reminders of all the changes that have happened, and make sure that everybody is informed of any changes, of anything that's been removed and or added. Next slide. So the major changes. Previous commercial foundation testing, as we just learned, is going to be allowed for sub-study assignment. Patients will now have to consent to either releasing their testing through the study or to release previous results from FoundationOne testing. And then they will still have to do the typical pre-screening versus screening, and all of it's going to be on one consent form. So that's really what I want to talk about, is what the consent form is now going to look like, because it's going to look very different. Next slide. The major change you're going to see first are what I'm going to call or statements. So for example, you'll notice up here on the upper left of my screen, I'm not quite sure which way it's oriented towards your screen, but if you have previous genomic profile test results, we are going to ask you to provide these to the study team, or we are going to ask you to submit a tumor sample to test for specific genes. So all of this is going to show up on the consent form. So you're going to have to make sure that patients know which one they're consenting to, because they might get confused and think that they're consenting to all of this, that they're sending tissue and previous results. And we just want to make sure that when they're being consented, that they're very clear on what they're consenting to. So you're going to see various or statements throughout the consent form. Next slide. So this section will appear under the what exams, tests, and procedures are involved in this study. And here is where it'll actually explain in depth what the patient is consenting to. So what will happen if they're submitting previous profile testing results, and then the typical what we have done in the past where we're submitting a tumor sample to the study team. So just make sure you go over which one applies to the patient that you are consenting at that time. Next slide. And then highlighted here is something we have added to the signature page, which is a major change and is very important. This is where they will actually be stating that they are agreeing to release previous profile testing results, and that they are authorizing Foundation Medicine to release and disclose any information performed to the SWOG group to use these results as to the study. So this is basically just how it's going to go through the system. We just need to make sure that everybody has permission to access everything they need to. So this will be added to the signature line of the consent form. Next slide. So these are just my major take-home points. I know this was very brief, but you know, there's probably more in-depth training at another time. So know which group your patients are consenting to. Again, pre-screening versus screening, and then previous testing versus tissue sample being sent. Make sure you read the statements that correspond with whichever situation your patient fits into. Make sure that patient knows what they are agreeing to, that it's one or the other and not both. Review the new consent form with all members of the team, potentially a couple of times to make sure, send out reminders if you need to. And make sure that all members of your team are aware of this exciting new change. I think this is something that we've all been kind of looking forward to, and I think it's a great change for the study as a whole. Thank you.
Okay, Louise.
Thanks, Dr. Herbst and Jess. I'm just finishing up the sequence on our change to allowing reanalysis of commercial FoundationOne CDx results. And I'm going to do a very quick how-to with the logistics of this process. And again, we will have more training opportunities in the future, and you can always contact me for more questions. So this will be a little bit brief, but just to give you an overview of how it will work. All right, next slide, please. So here's a little visual overview. The squares in blue are the steps that the site will need to take. The squares in gray are back-end steps, and then of course the green is our end goal. So I'm going to go into more depth on the blue squares in a minute. You can see that we will have a RAVE form for uploading the commercial CDx report, but I just want to highlight that that does not actually request the use of those results for subsidy assignment. That request is done through the SWOG specimen tracking system, almost as if you're submitting like a dummy specimen, but actually no specimen will actually need to be shipped. So we'll go into those steps in a little more detail. Next slide, please. The first step will be during open registration to step 1 of LUNGMAP, the screening step. As part of your eligibility, you'll confirm that there's a commercial FoundationOne CDx report that meets the requirement if you're planning to use this option. And then during the step 1 registration, you'll answer an auxiliary registration question regarding which approach will be used for biomarker profiling and select the reanalysis of commercial results option. Next slide. So next, you will navigate to SWOG specimen tracking system. This is just as if you, similar to as if you were going to ship a tissue specimen, but instead you will select this option here that's called request. And it will be going to lab number 242, which is just like a dummy lab that is for Foundation Medicine commercial NGS requests only. Next slide, please. This is a very important step. This is during the SWOG specimen tracking system process. You will answer what we call specimen-specific questions. In this case, these will be questions that are used by Foundation Medicine in order to link the request to their existing results. And so you'll see here, for instance, we definitely need the ordered test number that comes from your CDx report. We need some information about the patient, and we need the date of tissue collection and site of the original tissue that was used for the commercial results. Next slide, please. So lastly, in specimen tracking, you will need to select the button that says ship this shipment and generate packing list. In this case, there's actually no need to physically mail or email anything. The generating the packing list will act as the request to Foundation Medicine in the back end of the system, like electronically. So you just want to save that packing list for your records. It acts as like the requisition form, but nothing actually needs to be shipped. All right, next slide. So once that is done, the reanalysis will be going on at FMI, and in parallel, the site can submit the PDF report in RAVE. This will be in a commercial NGS testing folder that will roll out in RAVE, just like your other baseline forms. This will be used for source documentation only, so uploading the PDF here does not request the use of results for reanalysis and substudy assignment. That is done through the previous process I just outlined in the specimen tracking system. Next slide. And finally, the end goal, the site will receive the substudy assignment following the same process and timing as tissue submissions. So substudy assignment will be sent to email contacts that are entered either during registration or on the notice of progression form. The substudy assignment will also be available in RAVE. There will be no PDF reports attached to these emails. The PDF reports would have been previously shared via the commercial process, and if any updates occur during reanalysis, these will be shared to the original ordering physician using the same commercial process as well. And the timing currently is expected to be the same as the tissue process, so within 16 days after submission of the request, although we anticipate this will likely be shorter because this is a new process at FMI where they asked us to use a longer turnaround time window to start off with. And again, for patients pre-screened prior to progression, you will get a confirmation email saying that the results have been successfully transferred to SWOG, but the substudy assignment itself will be sent after submission of the notice of progression in RAVE. Next slide. This is my last slide, but maybe the most important one. If this is especially for any site coordinators and nurses out there, if you are planning to implement this and submit commercial FoundationOne results, please don't hesitate to reach out to your data coordinators, myself, Leah, and Amy. Our contact information is at the bottom of the slide. It's also in the protocol, and we would be more than happy to go over this process with you on the phone the first time or by email. We love to get questions ahead of time or even during the process because we can help you do it correctly the first time. That being said, if you think you made a mistake, definitely contact us as well, and we can usually help with that as well. So thanks so much, and I will turn it over to the next presenter.